Since this is our own homegrown IOF, it makes some sense to understand what happened. And after all, some $6 or $8 million of public money was spent on it, so shouldn't we try and get as much from it as we can? And here really is an outline of the phases of the commission. It was established in '85 by Barry Jones. Barry was then Minister of Science, and it was badged as an entity to encourage the public to have a say about the use of science and technology in building the future, something along those lines. So interestingly, at the very beginning, it actually never was designed as a true Futures or Foresight organization. It was a public awareness raising entity that really had a consciousness raising role rather than a substantive or professional one. So there you have a clue from the beginning. Rhonda Galbally was the first director. Some of you may know her from other contexts. Then in 1988, Ian Lowe was actually the interim director, and it would have been great if he could have stayed. He was easily very well qualified for this, but he couldn't. He was based in Brisbane. And then in 1989, Peter Elliott was appointed director, and he took the whole thing in a kind of social crusade direction. I've written this up in Futures for the Third Millennium if you want the whole story. 1991, Susan Oliver came on board, and she really brought the whole thing back to a much more professional focus. Susan's on our board, and she also will take part in some of the courses, probably in your second year. Susan's job was really difficult because at that stage the Commission was in quite bad shape, and it really proved impossible to recover it. So in '96, John Button took over the chairmanship of the board. It was then privatized, and I think most people have a lot of time for John Button, regardless of their politics, because most people realize what a good person he is, what a fine individual. The fact is, however, he just didn't get this domain. He's one of those people who never got what this is about. So he was unable to do anything really effective. So it closed down in '98, which is interesting, because the Commission for the Future couldn't secure its own future. So what did it get right? Do any of you remember 21C? Yeah? Some great work. I was really proud of that magazine. It was actually a world leader during its early years. There was nothing like it anywhere else in the world, anywhere. It was large format. It was colorful. It's beautifully edited. The articles were covering a range of futures-related things. And I was really proud of it at that time. The Commission raised the profile of some futures issues. I mean, they did some research on things like superannuation, which doesn't sound that interesting until you're thinking about yours, I guess. And most prominently, I think they succeeded in making the term greenhouse a domestic word that everyone understood, the greenhouse effect. That really went on the agenda during that year. They explored working to provide professional services. It wasn't that successful. And so, as I said, I saw it as a first generation IOF that can give us some lessons about how to proceed. Critique, diagnosis, action. The critique: you can't do futures work based on issues. I'm sorry, you just can't do it. Because issues are about the surface, and when we get into CLA, you'll see how that surface relates to deep structure. The surface stuff, the everyday stuff, the stuff you see in the papers, what I call pop futures, just doesn't cut it. It's just the surface manifestations of something deeper. So if you go in and create something which is about issues about science and technology, you're dead in the water to start with. There was no quality control. It was amazing, but no one employed there, with the exception of Ian Lowe, ever had any background in the field. So why would you create an entity and not staff it with people who were well schooled in the area? It's the politics of it, the fact that it was done by a Labour government or a ministry within a Labour government. Therefore, it lacked professional credibility, didn't get into the research, and it really failed in that legitimation test. Part of it that I was involved with was the BFEP, the Bicentennial Futures Ed project. I was actually brought to Australia in '86 to address a Futures in Education conference, because that was what my own research had been about. And this was a 2-year funded program, part of the bicentennial, obviously. And they set up a number of lighthouse schools around Australia. They provided materials, they provided workshops. The whole thing looked pretty good. Except that, like so many curriculum projects, I don't know how many of you have had a background in education. Part of my background was to study curriculum projects. What happened to them, how they were created, how they were implemented, how they died. This one died very quickly. Died for a number of reasons, but I guess the key one is number 2, is this framework of support. To make anything stick in a system so protean as an education system, you really do need to have that long-term support in place, because teachers are too damn busy and stressed to do it themselves. They need that support. Wasn't there. So it was a huge missed opportunity. So the story of the Commission for the Future, I've written it up in more detail, as I said. It's something to study. There's some things it got right. There's some things it got wrong. The conclusion, been there, done that, doesn't work, forget it, is wrong, in my view. The right response is, okay, it didn't succeed. It was the first generation. It was experimental. As I've actually said recently in a media thing that we'll talk about another time, at that time, the knowledge didn't really exist in Australia about how to get it right. They just didn't know. They were doing their best with the knowledge they had. So let's see it as an attempt, as a first attempt. Let's move on from there and try and create other arrangements that make better sense based on what we think we know.